Well, let's speak a little bit further about President Cyril Ramaphosa's working visit to the United States, what it entails and the timeline thereof. We're joined now live by SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who is in Washington. Sherwin, you're standing outside of the hotel that President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to stay. How long will it be before he arrives, and what are your expectations?
Yeah, he's just landed, so we can confirm that President Ramaphosa has touched down at Andrews Air Force Base, so he will be escorted, one imagines, by a blue lights convoy. So we expect him to arrive here within the next 30 minutes, maybe even less than that. That's a piece. And if they really speed down the highway, maybe he'll drive up behind us while we're having this discussion. As we mentioned in that preview, certainly a lot on the agenda for the discussion between both the Vice President Kamala Harris tomorrow morning and then later that lunchtime meeting with President Biden at the White House. That will also be, in addition to that, there will also be some interaction with congressional leaders. We talk about regional and global security, right? We talk about the issues in northern Mozambique, of course, the implications of this war in Ukraine that is now over its 7th month, the implications that has had on energy, the implications that war has had on food security. All those issues will be on the table here. There's also a public health peg, of course, as countries seek to build back better amid this COVID-19 pandemic. I think it has shown vulnerabilities in many countries around the world, including here in the United States, a developed country that is having to re-look at its public health system given what we saw play itself out in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, certainly in its early months. South Africa is certainly seeking to build back better in that sense. And then, of course, the issue of South Africa's transition away from its very heavy dependence, Tsepiso, on fossil fuels. Of course, we talk about the just transition, common but differentiated responsibilities. Developed countries essentially have to be funding the transition because developing countries cannot do that by themselves because the price tag is simply too much. So all that is on the table. Of course, South Africa's development, wanting to address issues of inequality and poverty in South Africa, looking for greater foreign direct investment. The number is at around $21 billion. That was in 2021, so they're trying to augment that. But look at the broader picture here, Tsepiso. Take a step back, right? Let's look at what's happened over the last 6 months. You saw a call between the two leaders, President Biden and President Ramaphosa, in April. That was followed by a visit to South Africa by Wendy Sherman. She's the Deputy Secretary of State of the United States. Followed then, of course, in August by the visit by Antony Blinken and a very robust discussion between himself and Foreign Minister and South Africa's International Relations Minister in South Africa. And now very quickly after that, you see this engagement here at the very highest level between the President of South Africa and the President of the United States. So clearly there is an effort, certainly from Washington, to bring South Africa closer. One can say, you know, the situation in Ukraine has really amplified some of the divisions that exist, including Cuba, including Western Sahara, including many other issues. But I put this to Naledi Pandor earlier, and she says, look, let's not describe this relationship as just cordial. It's actually a good relationship. And I think what South Africa is seeking out of this relationship is very much a focus on economic development and, of course, that transition in terms of climate change, adaptation and mitigation.
Sherwin, so let me just follow through with the point that you've just made. As South Africa's third largest trading partner, the presidency says President Ramaphosa would emphasize the need for multilateralism and dialogue to address challenges such as the need to stimulate the economy in the aftermath of COVID-19. You, in your discussion earlier on with Michelle Gavin, I'd like to underscore two words. One is strategy and the other phrase there being rules-based. And that suggests a long-term plan with an overall aim of some level of equity. Is this something that will come out of this discussion, or is it more still a discussion that will continue?
Yeah, look, Michelle Gavin making the point in that discussion with me about how the United States is really seeking to improve the relationship with South Africa. And one of the easiest ways to do that, essentially, what are some of the low-hanging fruit? would be something like, for example, removing the tariffs on South Africa's steel and aluminium exports to the United States that were imposed by the Trump administration. So, as we move from one administration to the other, those conversations are shifting. There was not a great deal of emphasis during the Trump administration on engaging with Africa. In fact, there were some choice words, but which we reported about in terms of what former President Trump said about African countries, which I will not repeat in this discussion. But certainly there is a better atmosphere, a more collegial atmosphere between South Africa and the United States in terms of addressing some of the key issues to South Africa. Remember, at the forefront of any African country's agenda is Agenda 2063, and that certainly, from a development point of view, South Africa's point of view, really has to be front and center in terms of how countries like the United States, the largest economy, the most richest country in the world, engages with a country like South Africa that has far greater developmental needs, notwithstanding the fact that there is this huge transition that needs to happen in South Africa in terms of how we produce our energy, right? Our dependence on coal, that shift that needs to happen certainly by 2030, which is the SDG deadline. But this notion of having net zero emissions by 2050 is going to be a huge lift for a country like South Africa. You just saw a few months ago the United States passed a $600 billion infrastructure bill. What lessons can South Africa learn from that, right? We don't necessarily have that fiscal space to pass legislation to that tune, which is double South Africa's GDP. But what lessons can we learn from South Africa in that sense? What lessons can we learn from the United States' transition away from fossil fuel dependence to more greener energy systems? And I think, it's all on the table. You also touched on the international rules-based system. Now, Lady Pandor really talks a lot, and I'm hearing some lights behind me. This could be the presidency piece, so let me step out of the way. I think South Africa's president arriving here. Aaron, take it off the sticks. Take it off the sticks. We're going to remove our camera. We might as well just listen in here. So we're just expecting President Ramaphosa to arrive now. A bit noisy. Can I just give you this for a second? Okay. Can I just leave it here?
All right, Sherwin, as we watch those visuals of what I believe is President Cyril Ramaphosa arriving, a special visit, as you said, there's been a change in tone of relations, and President Ramaphosa going through a pretty difficult time at home. I'd imagine that he would hope that this visit goes very well and that there's some significant points coming out of it.
Yeah, he's just walked in, Tsepiso. So I don't know if you can still hear me. The president of South Africa landing in Washington, D.C., and has just arrived here at the Ritz Hotel in downtown Washington, D.C. The ambassador for South Africa in Washington, Noma India Mfeketo, accompanying the president, and Naledi Pandor, who I must tell you, just a short time ago, had a one-on-one with Antony Blinken. Look, this is going to be a robust discussion. There are points of disagreement in terms of geostrategy and geopolitical divisions around South Africa. And I'm just being called close to Tsepiso. Just give me one sec. Aaron, let's go here. Come with me. Come back here. Yeah, so Sorry, it's a little bit chaotic here. Do bear with us. But as you correctly point out, a robust discussion expected between President Ramaphosa and President Biden tomorrow from an economic point of view, from a development point of view, and from a geostrategic point of view in terms of this tension one knows so well about, in terms of the tensions you are seeing across Africa between Russia, between countries like China and the United States. So that's certainly all on the table. Great timing on your part to the President, of course, now in the hotel behind me.
I was actually going to say great timing on your part, Sherwin. This is what we call live broadcasting, and thanks for being out there with us and giving us the very latest. My colleague Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who is outside of the Ritz Hotel in Washington, D.C., where he is staying during his visit. He's expected to meet President Joe Biden tomorrow and the Vice President Kamala Harris. We understand that the President will also meet some congressional leaders and civil rights movement veterans in the United States during his stay. We will hopefully reconnect with Sherwin, because I understand that it's possible the President may not be able to attend the UN General Assembly as he makes his way to London to attend the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II.